This is a really cool way to understand spiritual peak experiences, paradigm shifts, people's psychology, but conversely group psychology, since groups are made up of people. So your identity, like what you identify as, like what you think you are, what people call their ego, that's what most people are married to. That's the individual. So that's individualism. And what that does is it marries you to your sense of self. And so if you're when you're married to yourself, if you have false beliefs, if you have any falsity in your personal identity, either intentionally or accidentally, that identity, you're actually married to it. So then if you start to look for that truth, or if you start to flirt with that truth, interact with truth, you'll get your ego will start to berate you, similar to a jealous partner, right? So if you do anything that threatens or poisons the relationship that you have with yourself, this is identical to a marriage. Like if you want to understand human psychology, it's like you almost have to get married, or do these social marriages, social contracts, right? Like that's when you're being married to society. So if you steal or you lie or you cheat with other people, that's whenever you get a taboo violation, basically, or like a rush, that's from your spiritual marriage to whatever you're married to, your identity, your sense of self. And so when you're in a marriage with a bad person, right? That's if you have a poor sense of self, poor beliefs, thoughts, your marriage is to a bad person. And so that person is like resentful and jealous of the truth innately, like whether or not that you or your ego knows what the truth is. It's like a dumpy, frumpy girl. They're not gonna want their boyfriend being around somebody who is like the ideal, somebody who is like the true human form. And so you'll be harassed by your inner voices, like your demons. It's literally a psychotic relationship if you're married to your ego, but like it's just a thing that sort of happens in most people. You're the most important thing in your life usually becomes yourself. And so that has the same dynamics as any like live-in long-term relationship. So you'll start to want to seek the stuff that your relationship is lacking. Like if you don't have truth and you're married to yourself, then you'll still want to see the truth in the world. So you'll go and seek the truth. And when you're married to yourself, you can distance yourself from yourself and still be married, but you're basically to seek the truth, to shift paradigms. If your ego identified is the same as like sleeping around or cheating when you're married to a bad partner. So it's the exact same interpersonal dynamics that you see. And so people would get a rush, like sexual taboos, things where there's taboos is a violation of these. There's different levels of marriage. Like I think the klepto is the reason that stealing is a rush, is because you're violating your social marriage contract. And you'll see different groups or people, they're not actually, they don't get married, right, to the social contract, and so they don't care. for a society to function, everybody needs to be married to the same thing, or they don't care. And then when people are married to different things, that's where people get kinks and sort of perversions and taboos, is when if you're married to a bad person, then flirting with the truth becomes like adultery, or becomes like an affair. It's like a rush, and you can't stay there. You can't actually live with the truth. You can just taste it or touch it or experience it from time to time. So this is what's happening with like even ritual satanic abuse. There's a certain truth, like a deep truth, that is in this mystery of like life and death and abuse and relationships. And so they're not married to the truth. They're married to themselves, and just completely abusing and disregarding themselves in order to have this fling with reality, with truth. And so people get into these activities that gives them a huge rush, whatever it is, that lets them touch or taste truth outside of their marriage to what is false. Like when you steal, all is one. There is no stealing, right? So you touch that, like you touch that truth. Or if you break the social contract of like murder, if you like, murder is that social contract of like we're all at one on this level, would be the truth that you're supposed to be married to. But if you don't feel that, if you're married to yourself, you're married to something else. And so at that point, like, killing somebody might feel true. It might feel like it reflects the actual connectivity that you have between yourself and another person. But the only reason that it feels that way is because of the primary relationship, or the marriage to an idea or a sense of self that does not reflect or include that connection to the other person or to everyone. So then there's a rush of like stealing, or like everything being sacred, everything being God. If you don't feel that, or if you're married to something lesser than that, maybe you'll have like a foot fetish, up to where you're interested in worshiping and seeing the lowest, grossest possible thing as like, oh, this is the best thing ever. That's true for a lot of different things. It's like you might have this belief that like desacralizes some aspect of creation, of like something is lesser than. And so then when the flirting with the actual idea of that, the actual truth of that, will make it so that you're like worshiping cow shit or doing terrible actions. And because that shows you the truth of like, oh, God is even in terrible actions. But if you were actually married to God being in everything, then it's not going to be a rush. There's not going to be a rush. You're like, if you're married to like the most beautiful person on earth and they're not lacking anything, there's not going to be a rush of running into that outside of that. And then there's basically only kind of like work and toil. Like if you're just married to the truth, there's no rush in flirting with something not true. But otherwise, you're just with the truth. So it's kind of like business as usual, right? It's not like a rush, right? So all these rush of these like peak experiences, everything from like ego death, enlightenment, whatever, these experiences people have, the only reason that it's an experience is because of the marriage to falsehood. So when people are chasing peak experiences, they're reinforcing the marriage and the relationship to the untrue. Because when you actually bind yourself to what is true, it doesn't give you like a peak experience anymore. It's a subjugation. Like it's the correct subjugation, but it's not like a rush. You know, it would be what people call meaning. And so that's what's going on with all all this stuff is anywhere that there's like this, like I guess what people would call immediate gratification. That is an encounter with love. That's an encounter with truth. But the means by which you're encountering the love and the truth is via like an adulterous relationship. It's like you're having an adulterous relationship with what is good and what is true, but you're married to what is evil. And so people, like when people are married to what is evil, you're married to the ego. If you have to dissolve the marriage or the relationship with the ego before seeking what is true. Otherwise, it has this psychotic. While you're married to what is bad, or you got everything that you could possibly do in terms of courting, like knowing, learning about the truth, is violating like your marriage contract to yourself. So you have to break the marriage contract to the self. Then you can court and woo and study and relate with the truth. But until you do that, then all of the study and the worship and the adoration of the truth is wrong. The same way that like infidelity is wrong, or like stealing is wrong. Like if you're in a social contract where all the people are evil, and like you do so much that you like actually deserve the food, you deserve the money, like you genuinely deserve it, and like then you take the money that you deserve, and it would be good that you have that money, like you deserve it, but the social contract is bad. So you have to dissolve the social contract, otherwise when you get what you deserve, it's stealing. And so it's a super basic principle, and if you look at it and apply it to your life, you can understand exactly where everybody is at in their spiritual search. There's no search. It's all relationship. So it's how what people are married to determines if they're capable of doing good. If somebody's married to a bad idea, if somebody's married to an ego, they are incapable of doing good. Because even when they seek the good, they're hurting themselves, because they're hurting their marriage. And when you're married, it's part of you. So even if you're married to something false like the ego, if you violate that marriage, you're abusing yourself. Like the marriage to something false has to be dissolved. Otherwise, there's no good options, because when you seek the good option, you're it's still violating an order. So it's not good to be married to something bad, but when you're married to something bad, it's not good to be with something true. And so that's why, like, when most people have an awakening, they're in a marriage to something false. The awakening is the taste of something true, but then without like really understanding like how to actually dissolve the relationship with the self. And like marriage is forever in some sense. These things you have to die. So you have to have these like internal deaths. You have to have the whatever, the ego death. You have to have all these different types of death to break to break these contracts with the self, to break these contracts with other people. You have to die. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's like that's the entirety of the human spiritual path. Is it's relational. What is going on?